Hello, so in this video we're going to be looking at the effects which can be created for the divine domains which appear in Xanathar's Guide to Everything for the Cleric class within Fantasy Grounds. We can see here we've created our level 20 Cleric. We haven't bothered with any attributes or abilities or anything like that. And if we switch to actions, we can see we've already entered some of the abilities for the Forge domain. And I'll show you how I did this so that it's clear. Just drag and drop into here, and then in this box just type in Forge domain, and it'll drop into this particular power group that we have created. Now, we haven't bothered dragging in bonus proficiencies or the channel divinity, and we'll come to that in a moment. But in the meantime, what I'm going to do is pause the video, and then I'm going to create all the effects for these four, and then we'll come back and look at them. Right, we've entered all the effects now that we can. We haven't included bonus proficiencies because that's dealt with elsewhere in the character sheet, and the channel divinity one in this case is simply a theatre of the mind thing, so there's no effects that we can set up for that. But we have set up the effects for the ones that we can do. And the first thing that we did here in the Forge domain is to go into the magnifying glass beside it, and we set the ability here to Wisdom. This is so that any saving throws or anything like that, and any of these abilities are feeding off the Cleric's Wisdom, which of course is their spellcasting ability. So let's have a look at the first one here, which is Blessing of the Forge. So this one tells you that until the end of your next long rest, an object that you have touched, a non-magical object that you've touched, becomes magical and getting a +1 bonus to attack and damage rolls if it's a weapon, or a +1 bonus to AC if it's armor. So we've created an effect for this, or we've created two effects, one for the armor, AC 1, and another for the weapon. Now you can see we've given this a name because this is a long. This one lasts 8 hours, so it's going to last a long time. So it's a good practice to give the thing a name if it's going to be lasting a long time, because then we know exactly why the effect is on the character. And the effect is just a +1 to attack, +1 to damage, and also given the weapon the damage type magic. Now, the problem with this effect is that once it's on a character, it'll apply to any weapon that they use, and not just the weapon that you've specifically touched. So that effect will need to be switched on and off if the character uses multiple weapons or switches weapons or whatever. So that's something to be aware of. And a similar thing happens with the AC, although people probably don't change their armor so often as they do their weapons. But the AC of 1 will give the armor class, or give the character a bonus to his armor class of 1. But if they change their armor, then obviously that effect will need to be removed. This feature can only be used once per long rest, so we've gone into the preparation mode and we've changed this to 1 and this to daily to signify that that's the case. And so once it's being used, it can be clicked, it'll be removed, and when the player takes a long rest, it'll come back. So that's Blessing of the Forge, and then let's look at the Soul of the Forge. And starting at 6th level, we get resistance to fire, and while wearing heavy armor, we get a +1 bonus to AC. So that's just sorry, that's the wrong one. This one. So we've just created a single effect to cover all of that. We've given it a name as well because this is going to be a permanent effect which is going to sit on the Cleric. So it's just resist fire and AC 1. targeting self, never expiring, and no duration, so it'll remain there forever. Straightforward enough. And the next one, Divine Strike. Basically, you do additional damage once you've hit something. You can do this once in each of your turns, very similar to the rogue's critical damage or sneak attack. And so you just do an extra 1d8 fire damage, so fairly straightforward again. We just have an effect which does the damage, the target self, and it expends on next roll. That way you have to apply it before the damage, and it will come off once the damage is rolled. Straightforward one as well. And the final one is the Saint of Forge and Fire, which is very similar to the Soul, except that you gain immunity to fire and resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing if it's not magical. So this is what the Pling character here does. It basically says that you resist bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing as long as it's not magic. So if our cleric gets hit with a bludgeoning weapon, then the bludgeoning damage will be resisted unless the weapon is a magic weapon, in which case the damage gets through. Again, this has been set to self and never to expire, and we've given this one a name as well so that we know what it is. It'll be an effect which will remain on the cleric for a long time. Okay, so that really is the Forge domain. So I'll pause the video again and I'll create all the effects for the Grave domain, and we'll be back in a moment. So we've added in all the Grave domain effects as well as all the abilities, etc. So let's have a look here. The first one we want to look at is the Circle of Mortality. We haven't added this one in because it's theatre of the mind, really, to some extent. There isn't really a way to create effects to deal with this. It'll simply have to be done manually. There just isn't a way to do it. The next one is Eyes of the Grave, and so if we have a look at that, again, it's a theatre of the mind's ability. This you can detect undead and things like this, but we've included it here because it has limitations. You can only use it a number of times equal to your wisdom modifier, and you regain expended uses when you finish a long rest. So we've gone into preparation mode here, and we've given this 2. We've assumed that the character has got a wisdom modifier of 2, and we've given it 2 daily, and so when we can knock this off, and when the last expended uses, it's gone, and then when we take a long rest, they come back. So that's why we've included this one here. There's no effects, but it's there to cover or to track the uses. Now the next one is Channel Divinity, and you'll see here that we've actually included a new section with all of the Channel Divinities. I've actually taken the Forge Domain one in here as well, and although the Forge Domain one is simply a theatre of the mind, we've included them here both so that we can track their usage. At 20th level, a cleric has 3 uses of their Channel Divinity, and so rather than going into preparation mode, we have gone into the data up here, and we have set the number of uses here to 3 daily, which would be for a 20th level cleric. If this was a 1st to 6th level cleric, it would be 1 use. And the reason we've done it from here is that no matter how many Channel Divinities you have, you only get 3 uses across them all. So when you've used 1, let's say you use your Artisan's Blessing. Now obviously this is false because you can't have both domains at the same time, but you can have normal Channel Divinities just as a normal part of your clerical abilities. But as you can see, once we've ticked one off here, this other one gets greyed out, and then if we tick off this one here, they both get greyed out, and we've used 2. And once all 3 have been used, it goes away, and once again, if we take a long rest, they'll come back. So that's the best way to track the channel divinities. So onto the Path of the Grave then. So what this does is you curse a creature, and all your allies, including yourself, will get, or the first time that somebody hits the creature then will do double damage, because it makes the creature vulnerable to all damage. So the effect that we've created here is just a vuln all. It's set to targets, and it's set to expend on next action. Now this effect will remain until the end of your turn rather than the start of your turn. Normally Fantasy Grounds expends effects when it comes round to your turn, so assuming that it's our cleric's turn, and let's give her an initiative of 10. And supposing she chooses orc number 3 to be cursed, so she places this effect on orc number 3. And if we go into this little dialogue here, we'll see that the effect to, or the initiative to adjust on, is 10. So that means when initiative 10 comes around, which is our cleric's initiative, this effect will expire. But we don't want it to expire at 10, we want it to expire at the end of the cleric's turn. So since initiative goes from highest to lowest, if we put a number in here that's less than 10, then this will help us. So let's put it in as 9.9, just in case somebody else has got an initiative count of 9. And then we will put the duration in to 2 instead of 1. And in fact, we should alter this to make it 1 round. So what will happen now is that when we cycle through the combat tracker, at the end of our cleric's turn, the count will go to 1. But when we get back to our cleric's turn, the effect is still applied. And it'll only remove itself once our cleric ends her turn there, so the effect will go away. So the Dungeon Master needs to adjust that and make the rounds 2 and adjust the effect, or adjust to round on. Obviously, if we just go through that again, if the effect on the orc, if somebody was to hit the orc before it becomes supposing we move on to Irani's turn, and let's supposing she hits the orc, then the effect will come off. So it doesn't matter really then at that time what the initiative to adjust on is, because the effect will remove. And you can see from down here that the orc was vulnerable to all and took double the damage. Irani did 5 and the orc took 10 points of damage. Right, so let's clear that up, and we now go on to the Sentinel at Death's Door. So this one here essentially allows you to turn a critical hit into a normal hit. So there isn't really an effect that we can do to help here, because we can't test for a critical hit and then do something on it. So there are no effects that we can create. So we could handle this just manually with the Dungeon Master removing the critical damage after the damage has been dealt. Or we could do it this way, where let's turn on the manual dice roller so we can guarantee the rolls. If Orc 3 was to attack Irani here, and we'll make sure that he criticals, you'll see that down here we've got a critical hit. So if damage is now rolled, it'll be critical damage. So we could, if we just let this roll, and we can see that the green dice is the critical damage. So the Dungeon Master could just simply click onto Irani's wounds and reduce that by the 2 wounds that she suffered from the critical dice. Another way to do it is if the orc makes his attack and criticals another critical hit, what we can do is just say, okay, the orc is hit, we'll assume the orc is hit, but we'll make another attack anyway, and this time we'll not let it roll because we don't want it to be another critical. So let's just give it 10. This is another hit as it so happens, but this roll here will have removed the critical hit from Fantasy Grounds, and so any damage that is now dealt to Irani, just allow this to roll, will be normal damage. So that's another way that we could do this, but there isn't an effect that we could put in place that would help us in this respect. So let's just turn the manual dice roller back off so that it doesn't get in the way again. Now the other reason we've put Sentinel at Death's Door here is, again, it's got a limited number of uses, and so again we've just gone in and we've assumed that the Cleric's Wisdom modifier here is 2, and we've given it 2 uses. Right, so that's Sentinel at Death's Door. Potent spellcasting. You can add your Wisdom modifier to any damage dealt with a cantrip. So the effect that we've placed here is simply damage and the modifier for the Cleric's Wisdom, and we've set it to expend on next action and a targeting to self. So all you can do with this is to apply this effect to the Cleric just before they roll for damage if they are casting a cantrip, and the effect will take account of the Wisdom modifier, add that into the damage, and then it'll be removed. And the final one is Keeper of Souls. And again, it's a difficult one because there's no real effect that we can create for it. We can sort of create an effect which can be edited on the fly, as it were. It's just a heal. And if the situation arises, the Dungeon Master or the player could come in, and if this is a 5 hit dice monster, just change that number there to a 5, and then apply the heal to the ally. However, it's not really worthwhile, I don't think, creating an effect for this. Create it anyway and it's there. I think it's one that you can just do manually. Right, that is it for the Xanathar's Cleric Archetypes. We'll see you in the next video, should you care to watch it. Bye for now.